All right, let's talk about it. When Elon Musk sat down with Joe Rogan, it created an absolute firestorm. But was it a really groundbreaking interview, or was it just a platform for some wild, unchecked ideas? Today, we're going to dig right into the debate that exploded afterward.
This single question, man, it just gets right to the heart of the whole controversy. Was Rogan acting as a journalist here, or was he just a buddy with a microphone? To even begin to answer that, we have to look at what was actually said, and maybe more importantly, what wasn't.
So, to break this all down, we're going to look at two completely different takes pulled from our source analysis. Think of it like a debate. In one corner, we've got Matt, who's convinced Rogan just enabled Musk. And in the other corner, we have Lorena, and she thinks Rogan pulled off this brilliant extraction of some really deep truths. Okay, but before we can even get into judging the interview itself, we got to understand what they were even talking about. And at the core of it all is Musk's incredibly bleak, almost apocalyptic diagnosis of the United States. Musk's point is basically this: we're too late. The window to fix things, it didn't just close, he says, it slammed shut. And maybe we didn't even hear it. That societal decay everyone's worried about, he's saying it's not on the horizon. It's here, right now. And for him, this isn't just about the economy or national debt. He's talking about something much deeper, a kind of spiritual, psychological collapse. And get this, he says that's what keeps him up at night, more than AI, more than getting to Mars. So if you boil it all down, his diagnosis really hits three key areas. First, a financial system he sees as totally rigged. Second, a complete societal breakdown of trust. And third, a political system that he believes just runs on fear to keep control. And this is the foundation for the entire debate we're about to get into. All right, so with that pretty dark worldview laid out, we get to the real core of the conflict. How did Joe Rogan handle all this? Did he push back, or did he just hand over a giant global megaphone? This is where Matt comes in, and his argument is pretty straightforward. He says, look, the power dynamics are the whole issue. Rogan gives this guy a global platform and doesn't push back at all. It stops being an interview and just becomes a narrative. Lorena, though, she sees it from a totally different angle. She says the point isn't to start a fight. It's to expose the raw, unfiltered mindset of a guy who genuinely believes he's seen behind the curtain. She thinks Rogan is letting us see that. And you can really see their disagreement play out over this idea of the system. Matt's accusation is that Rogan just lets Musk talk about this vague, invisible machinery of power without ever asking for a single specific or any proof. But when Musk says something like, the same systems that feed you ads can feed you lies, Lorena's defense is that Rogan is getting at a bigger truth, that he's letting Musk explain, from a high-altitude view, how technology can amplify our worst instincts, a view she thinks a cheap confrontation would totally miss. For Matt, this is where it all kind of falls apart. He basically says Musk is confusing being honest with being a drama queen. It's a celebrity pity party wrapped in an apocalypse warning. So when Musk talks about being in danger and needing security, Matt's just not buying it. He hears a billionaire complaining, not a man making a vulnerable confession. But this is Lorena's whole point. She says it's a confession. She argues that Rogan's non-confrontational style is exactly what gets Musk to admit something real, that fame now means exposure, and exposure is danger. Her argument is, you want a quick soundbite? Fine. But Rogan, he wants the soul. Okay, so Lorena's whole defense really rests on this idea that you have to understand the person to understand their warnings. So who is the man behind this message? Let's take a look. Well, Musk himself gives us a pretty vivid picture. He says, my mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me. That suggests a kind of constant internal turmoil that's definitely going to shape how you see the world. And when you look at his life, it's just a life of extremes. We're talking about a violent upbringing in South Africa where he says he was almost beaten to death once. But then, at just 12 years old, he's teaching himself to code and selling his first video game. And you've got this family legacy, too. His grandfather was an explorer who flew a small plane all the way from South Africa to Australia. Then by 1999, he's selling his first big company for hundreds of millions. It's just a lot. And this piece of context really adds another layer to everything. He talks about his father being a deeply complicated and at times toxic figure, and says his childhood left him with deep emotional burdens. So you start to see how maybe his focus on systemic rot and personal danger could be deeply connected to a really turbulent and difficult early life. So let's pull it all together. We've looked at Musk's diagnosis, we've broken down the debate between enabling versus extracting, and we've added some of the personal context. And what we're left with are two starkly different ways to see this whole thing. So here are the closing arguments. For the prosecution, Matt's final take is that this was nothing more than a celebrity pity party wrapped in an apocalypse warning. But for the defense, Lorena sees it as something much bigger, a national psychoanalysis session, a deep dive into a powerful mind, and by extension, maybe a look at the country itself. So what's the verdict? Profit or pity party? The source material lays out all the evidence and the arguments, but it doesn't give us a final answer. That's up to you. What did this interview truly reveal about Elon Musk, about Joe Rogan, and maybe even about the state of the world? It's a big question, and after all this, the final verdict is yours.